A delegation of representatives from SAARC, or the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, called on President Mahinda Rajapaksa yesterday.
The delegation, which consisted of 2 ministers in charge of commerce and 4 commerce secretaries from SAARC member countries, met with President Mahinda Rajapaksa at Temple Trees yesterday. The delegation arrived in Colombo to attend the South Asian Free Trade Area Ministerial Council meeting that took place yesterday. During the meeting, President Rajapaksa had expressed Sri Lanka's willingness to further strengthen bilateral ties between SAARC nations in all sectors, especially in areas of trade, investment and tourism. President Rajapaksa had also pointed out that with the defeat of terrorism and the return of peace to the country, there is a highly favourable environment for investments in Sri Lanka.
Well, Senior Minister D.W. Gunasekara says that the removal of the police department from the Ministry of Defence is a result of the strong stance that he maintained within the government.
The Senior Minister expressed this view at a UPFA rally in Kandy.
Leftist parties were of a clear decision that the political culture of the country needs to be turned around for the good of the country. If not, the country will be led to a disastrous situation. That is why incidents like the one in Valivaria took place. We in the left took a strong stand within the government and outside the government over this incident. This morning, the President issued a gazette notification removing the police department from the Ministry of Defence. Until the incident in Valivaria took place, they didn't understand the gravity of this and didn't listen to us. Some are still living with the war mentality. They speak of the war and the war alone. During the last 4 years and 4 months following the end of the conflict, we should have carried out more work in order to unite the country. History would never forgive us. We missed the opportunity that was bestowed upon us simply because we didn't see it right.
In view of tomorrow's Grade 5 scholarship exams, a no-campaign time frame has been announced by the Election Secretariat.
Deputy Election Commissioner M.M. Mohammed said that election propaganda activities will be prohibited between 8 p.m. today and 2 p.m. tomorrow in the central, northern and northwestern provinces. He noted that all candidates have been advised to refrain from election propaganda activities during this frame. Meanwhile, an operation was launched by the police in the Kurunagala district to remove all illegal election propaganda offices and illegal banners, posters and cutouts. The Election Secretariat noted that the aim of the operation was to make candidates aware of the need of establishing election officers in compliance with the law.
A public rally that was organised by the National Unity Alliance was held in Putlam yesterday.
The United National Party is destitute today. For 19 years, UNPers were not fortunate. When we tried to revive the party, they pulled us back. There are 1 or 2 useless individuals in the party who are disrupting the unity within the party. They want to have the whole cake for themselves. They are too stingy to give us a piece. However, they do not know how to make a cake. There are a couple of people in the party who are afraid of the party leader because they were rejected by the people. Several other politicians also attended this meeting.
Well, we'll be going in for a short commercial break, but before that, here's a look at the day's newspaper cartoon. Welcome back.
Speaking at the event in Colombo yesterday, resident representative of the IMF, Dr. Koshi Mathai, says that the government should ensure the private sector plays the role of the principal player in investments.
If you look at other countries which have been successful, China, I mean, would you guess what is the percentage of GDP that China has spent on public investment? It's 18% of GDP. 18%, 3 times what we're spending here. Now, China is in its own category. I'm not saying that we need to follow that. But even countries like Malaysia and Thailand, I believe, are in the 8 to 10% range. Even India, I think, is higher than we are now. Investment is a major thing, and of course, bringing the private sector in. Not just having government-to-government transactions, but allowing space for the private sector to get involved. Not just as contractors, but as principal players in these deals.
Well, Egypt has been in turmoil, and we at the News First International Desk have been monitoring this story right throughout. Thousands of Egyptians protesting against military rule gathered in several cities last night despite tight security. Now, anti-coup protesters defied the curfew in Helwan, Minya and Nasser city following peaceful protests in the capital, Cairo.
Yes, that's right, Janali. Supporters of the country's deposed President Mohamed Morsi changed tactics by demonstrating in small rallies that avoided confronting a heavy military deployment waiting for them across the country. The demonstrations came a day after deposed autocrat Hosni Mubarak was released from prison and placed under house arrest in a military hospital in southern Cairo, adding to tensions. They're also the first since the Brotherhood spiritual leader Muhammad Badi was arrested and accused of instigating violence. Nearly 80 Brotherhood members, including senior leaders and spokesperson, were arrested on the eve of the incident. And now coming back to a story that we touched upon at the top of the news. The US Navy is expanding its presence in the Mediterranean Sea with a 4th cruise missile armed warship, amid indications from Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel that the US is positioning assets in anticipation of any decision by President Barack Obama to order military action on Syria.
That's right. Now, yesterday's decision came after rebels and activists claimed that a chemical weapons attack on a rebel-held area in the outskirts of the Syrian capital Damascus killed hundreds of people. According to foreign media reports, the USS Mayhem, a cruise missile-armed warship, had finished its deployment and was due to head back to its home base in Virginia, but the commander of the US 6th Fleet decided to keep the warship in the region. Now, reports added that the USS Ramage arrived to replace the Mayhem, but the Mayhem is going to stay around a bit longer, so temporarily there will be 4.
They're bringing first kiss and everybody up right now. Here in about 10 minutes, because the other one's going to pull.
A vast California wildfire sweeps further into Yosemite National Park, a major tourist destination in the US. The blaze exploded in size overnight and resisted efforts to control it, despite thousands of firefighters battling the flames.
Now, the park has the electrical infrastructure serving the city, and power lines in San Francisco have been forced to shut down. The California governor has declared a state of emergency. It is one of the fastest moving of 50 large wildfires raging across the west of the U.S., blackening around 11,000 acres. These visuals that you are witnessing right now are of a vast California wildfire which swept further into the Yosemite National Park, which is a major tourist destination in the U.S.
And now moving on to some sports news, it's tennis. Dinesh Kantan Thangaraja and Amrita Muthaya clinched victory at the National Tennis Championship men's and women's category for the second consecutive time.
The
finals of the men's and women's singles events of the 98th National Tennis Championships 2013 were held today at the Sri Lanka Tennis Association courts. Sangathu Korle was defeated by Dinesh Kanthan Thangaraja in the final 3-1. Rashenka Fernando faced Amrita Muthaiya at the women's singles final. The first round of the match concluded with Rashenka Fernando beating Amrita Muthaiya 7-5. However, the second and third rounds were dominated by Amrita Muthaiya with a 6-3, 6-2 win. Amrita Muthaiya claimed the women's singles title for the second consecutive time.
Finally, in some rugby news tonight, New Zealand retained the Bledisloe Cup and maintains their 100% start to the Rugby Championship with a second consecutive win over Australia.
The match between New Zealand and Australia at the Rugby Championships commenced at Wellington today. The All Blacks took control of the game from the very start. The All Blacks took a 15-6 half-time lead against their rivals.
The try scored by Ben Smith.
The decisive second half was also dominated by the New Zealanders with a 12-10 lead. All Blacks, who dominated the first and second halves of the game, emerged victorious over the Wallabies with a lead of 27 points for 16. The second match of the Rugby Championship will see Argentina aiming to salvage some pride, hosting against their rivals South Africa.
Well, with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of Primetime News. I'm Sonali Manikavadike.
And I'm Madhushka Balasuriya. But before we leave, a quick reminder. Sonali, tomorrow Navi Pillay is coming to Sri Lanka.
That's right. The United Nations Human Rights Commissioner will arrive in Sri Lanka in the morning, and we will be comprehensively covering that story for you. So stay with News First.
Have a very good evening.
Good night.
News First at 9.
Hotline 0114-896-896 www.newsfirst.lk. Feedback at newsfirst.lk.